18 years. 18 years I had devoted all my heart and soul to building from nothing, turning a small company into a large-scale organization. But all that I built, all the efforts I have put in now, are just faint memories, like waves lapping in the wind. Surely few people know that what you see today at Veltria Housing, from the modern real estate management system to the technology platform we have built, all started with a small idea, a few computers, and a dial-up internet connection. And I am the one who witnessed and created each step of that development. It's been 18 years since I joined the company. At the time, Veltria Housing was a small company called Bayview Properties, with just a few rental units and a staff of about a dozen people. The company's president, Harold Bay, recruited me when I was working at a consulting firm in Syracuse. He said, "We need a solid system to expand, and I think you're the guy to do it." Initially, the company had just a few desktop computers, a fax machine, and a dial-up internet connection. It was a very simple system, but that was a foundation I had to build. Nothing was easy, but I knew I had to create something sustainable for the company. Gradually, I started building an integrated property management system, from managing applicant profiles to automated maintenance requests to collecting rent. These tools helped the company grow rapidly, not only increasing productivity, but also reducing costs, operating costs. I was a big part of that growth. I started from nothing, and in just a few years, my system was helping Veltria Housing manage hundreds of apartments, then thousands across multiple states. The company grew from a few apartments in one small area to now managing over 60 properties in 4 states. I wasn't just building the technology, I was building the future of the company. But things never stayed that way. The company started to change when Harold decided to retire. His son, Justin, took over the company and sold it to a private equity group. That's when things started to go wrong. When the new executives came in, things started to change. They came in with a very different mindset, focused on cutting costs and cutting long-term expenses to achieve short-term profits. Our meetings were no longer the same, with long-term projects like my systems documentation team being rejected because it was too expensive. At that time, I started to see signs that I had never thought of before. The management's decisions were no longer based on sustainable development strategies, but instead on cost-cutting decisions aimed at short-term profits. And that's when I realized that I was at a crossroads from which there was no turning back. They started to bring in young consultants, MBAs from prestigious universities. They talked about change in the real estate industry with cloud solutions and off-the-shelf software products. They looked at my system with a blank look, as if they didn't understand what I had created, and started to replace it with cheap solutions. I still tried to defend what I had built. I persistently explained to them about our system, a system specifically designed to suit Veltria's needs, not to be replaced by off-the-shelf solutions. But they didn't understand, and gradually, I was excluded from important meetings. No one listened anymore. The company had changed, and I realized that my loyalty and contribution might no longer be valued. Everything was now just a number, a short-term profit. I had devoted myself to Veltria for 18 years, and I began to realize that the warning signs from before were just part of a bigger picture that I couldn't see clearly. But now I understand. No matter what, I am still proud of what I built, and I know that the value of a system lies not only in the technology, but also in the sustainability of how it is created. After Harold Bay retired and the company was sold to an investment group, what I had built seemed to fade from the new management. They didn't understand the value of the system I had created. And the first person I met on the new team was Graham Vickers. He was a young executive with expensive sunglasses and an MBA from Cornell. I remember the first time he called me into his office. All he said was, "We need to reduce costs. We can't keep doing this." Graham was the one who brought what he called change, but it was really replacement. He hired a bunch of young engineers, fresh out of college, and started replacing veterans like me. They didn't understand the system I had built, and before long I realized they don't need me anymore. The times I tried to explain that our system was too specific to replace with cheap outside solutions were ignored. My request to build a system documentation team to archive, maintain, and upgrade the system for sustainability were flatly rejected. They said, "It's too expensive." But I knew that was the reason to get rid of me. And then they started bringing in young consultants from prestigious universities who had no real experience with Veltria's system. They sat and listened to me explain the software, the code, and then came up with new solutions that never fit the current system. They didn't understand how I had worked to keep the system running smoothly all these years. Gradually, I found myself being left out of important meetings where I used to participate and contribute ideas. But now, I was no longer invited to participate. They no longer value my opinion, even though those decisions directly affect what I've worked so hard to build. This feeling of being gradually eliminated is not what I imagined would happen. This company used to be my family, where I had spent 18 years of my youth and intelligence. But now, I feel like I no longer have a place. Elaine, my wife, was the first to notice. One evening, while we were having dinner, she looked at me and said, "They are slowly pushing you out. You have to be prepared for that." I laughed, thinking she was just worried. "They need you," I said. "No one understands the system like I do." But looking into her eyes, I knew she was right. They didn't need me anymore. Victor's voice wavered, as if he were admitting something he had previously refused to believe. Actually, I knew that, but I didn't want to admit it. It was only because of my ego, because of my pride, that I refused to see the truth. They didn't need me anymore. And then one day, I got a call from HR. They invited me to a meeting. I knew what was going to happen, but I still went. The cold feeling when I walked into their office. I saw everything more clearly than ever. "We'll continue with the younger engineers," they said. "Thank you for your previous contributions." I have no objections. I have nothing more to say. And I leave without a word complaint, without a trace, because I know they will pay the price of their decision. However, I know that I have devoted myself to this company. And even if I am eliminated, I will have no regrets, because I have done everything I could and I have built a solid foundation. There will come a time when they will realize the value of what I have left. But I am no longer a Veltria person, and life without them continues. That day, I walked into the conference room like any other day, but the atmosphere in that room, it was different. Graham sat there with a cold gaze, along with Diane from HR. They were all preparing for something that I knew. It was just a matter of time. "Victor," Graham said, "we can no longer afford to pay you. This decision is not about your ability. It is a business decision." Those words, I heard them in disbelief. But I knew one day this would happen. I had been waiting for it for a long time. And then they gave me a severance package. It was generous. 2 months pay plus unused vacation. But I didn't care about the money anymore. I just wanted to know why. Why was I the one being let go? They didn't have an answer. Because they didn't want me anymore. They just wanted the numbers, the balance sheets. That was it. And I smiled a little bitterly. "Thanks," I said. "Good luck to the company." I didn't react, didn't argue, didn't threaten legal action, because I knew this wasn't my fight anymore. So I stood up and walked out of the meeting room. I cleaned up my desk with a cardboard box filled with memories from the past 18 years. Every pen, every note, every little gift my colleagues gave me, everything was neatly placed in that box. 18 years of hard work. Suddenly, only worthless items were left, hastily stuffed into a cardboard box. I didn't say anything to anyone, just quietly packed up my things. My colleagues looked at me, not daring to look me in the eye. They knew that they could be next. They were afraid of change, afraid of a system that no one understood like me. Less than an hour after I left the company, my phone started ringing. It was Graham on the other end, then Diane from HR, then a few other colleagues. They were talking about the system problems I had left behind, and that they were no longer able to fix them. "The system is down," Graham said, his voice starting to panic. "Can you help us? It just takes a little time." I listened with nothing but calm. They needed me, but they hadn't needed me before. The calls kept coming, each one more urgent. "The system is down," Diane said, her voice almost desperate. "We need you, Victor."
But I didn't pick up. I was gone, and they would have to learn to fend for themselves. Gradually, I realized something important. The company had abandoned me when they needed me most. And now, when everything was falling apart, they were coming back to me. But I was not their salvation. I was gone, and I had no obligation to help those who had decided they didn't need me. My value wasn't in whether I could save them again. My value was in what I had done and what I had built. I couldn't save a system that they had decided to destroy, and I didn't need to save them to prove my worth.
And then I left it all behind. The calls for help, the pleas. I knew they would have to learn from their mistakes. I had built a solid system for this company, but they didn't see it. And now they have to face the consequences of disrespecting what I did. Because I know life goes on, and I'm ready for the new things that are waiting for me.
After turning down all the offers from Veltria, I didn't think I would face such a bleak future. But life has a way of making you realize that when one door closes, another one opens. And that door came from a place I didn't expect, Devlin Systems. I received an email from Lawrence Devlin, the CTO of Devlin Systems. He said they had heard about me and were impressed with what I had done. And then our meeting opened up a whole new opportunity. They wanted me to join Devlin Systems as a systems manager. Devlin Systems is not a big company like Veltria, but they have a clear vision, and they need someone with experience to build a sustainable system from the ground up. This is the opportunity one had been waiting for. I don't have to save something that is broken, but to rebuild something solid from the ground up. This was completely different from what I had experienced at Veltria. I could rebuild a new system, make sure everything was well documented, and more importantly, I could create a long-term foundation without having to make bad decisions to save money. I started Devlin Systems with a new team, young people who were enthusiastic and willing to learn, and I knew I had to start from scratch. It was not just about rebuilding the technology, but creating a foundation for the company to grow long-term. It was not just about software or code. It was about how to maintain and protect the system. In the past, Veltria has rejected my request to build a system documentation team. They didn't realize that these systems can't just be built and operated without a clear, detailed set of documentation. At Devlin, I don't want to make that mistake. Every detail, every line of code needs to have supporting documentation. And most importantly, my team will be fully trained to understand and maintain the system in the future. I don't just want to build a good system. I want to build a system that never gets left behind, never gets forgotten. My team will have the knowledge, the documentation, and the guidance to never make the same mistakes I saw at Veltria. Each system will be designed to be maintainable, easily upgradable, and most importantly, able to operate smoothly without having to rely on someone to rescue us. I saw the mistakes at Veltria, what they missed, the shortcomings in the development process. But now, at Devlin, I have the opportunity to do everything right from the start. Everything I built before, the hard lesson from Veltria, will be applied here, so we can go further, more sustainably.
No one can build a good system without learning from mistakes. And I have learned a lot. Devlin Systems will not be just a technology company, but a sustainable company where every detail matters and every employee is well trained. And I will be the one to lead them from what I have experienced. And whether it's Veltria or Devlin, I know one thing for sure. The system I build is not just about technology, but also about sustainability and preparing for the future.
It's been a year since I left Veltria. They had time to change, to learn, but it seems they didn't. The hasty decisions, the short-term profit focus, started to show. They lost their biggest client, Westbrook Properties, when their system couldn't meet customer demand. And that's just part of what they had to pay. At first, they thought cutting costs was a way to grow faster. But when the system collapsed, when customers started leaving, they realized that you can't build a strong company on a weak foundation. That's the price they had to pay, and it wasn't cheap. It was a result of a lack of respect for experience and sustainability. Veltria started with the wrong steps, and now they have to face the truth. The system is not simply code or software. It is the infrastructure, the backbone of the company. And when that backbone is weak, everything collapses. Some people at Veltria probably didn't understand this until it was too late. They still thought that everything could be easily replaced with external solutions. But when you don't know how to protect and maintain what you have built, it will cost you dearly. And that I saw clearly. In contrast, Devlin Systems, under my leadership, has grown tremendously. We not only built it from scratch, but we created a solid system with detailed documentation and excellent maintenance methods. We successfully integrated Veltria's system, and not only that, we scaled it up, making the company more sustainable. With Devlin, we created something that Veltria could never do, a system that could be maintained for a long time, not depend on a single person, and a well-trained team that could ensure the system ran smoothly even when I was no longer there. That is something I built from the hard lessons I learned from Veltria. In the end, I realized that real value is not how much money you make or how many customers you have, but the ability to build something sustainable. That's a lesson I learned over many years. You can make quick profits, but if you don't build a solid foundation, things will fall apart. What I did at Veltria was not about a temporary system, but a long-term system, protected and maintained properly. And I also knew that at Devlin, I wouldn't make those mistakes again. We would do things right from the start because I understand the value of sustainability. And that's what I bring to this company. Value is not about short-term profits. Value is about what you build for future. And I, for one, will always pursue that. That's why I never went back to Veltria. They missed the real value of experience. But I won't do that at Devlin. We'll build a system that's reliable, resilient, and will stand the test of time.
In the end, what I did was not just to seek personal success. It was to prove that sustainable systems will always win, because their true values will always surpass the superficiality of short-term profits.